Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Ms. LaViolette, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Martinez, you may continue.
Yesterday we finished off and we were talking about the Reagan-Housley instant message that you reviewed. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And in it, Mr. Alexander expressed that he was extremely fearful of the defendant because of her stalking behavior, correct?
He didn't say he was extremely fearful. No, he didn't.
Judge, I think we need to approach now. You read the Reagan-Housley instant message, correct?
Yes, I did.
And there's an indication to the reader that Mr. Alexander was extremely afraid because of the stalking conduct by Jodi Arias, correct?
I don't see any behavior supporting his fear, Mr. Martinez. I see no behavior supporting that fear. And they were both laughing in the email as well.
You can tell, first of all, whether somebody is laughing on the other side of a text or of an instant message, ma'am? You can tell that?
There was just ha, ha, ha.
Not at that time, was there?
Right before that, as they were talking about it.
Not at that time when he said that, correct?
No.
Judge, may I ask the question that we've been talking about?
Gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you go back to the jury room for approximately 5 minutes. No more than 5 minutes. Please remember the admonition.
Please back to the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez, you may continue.
Ma'am, you reviewed the Reagan-Housley instant message involving her and Mr. Alexander, correct?
Correct.
Isn't it true that Mr. Alexander was extremely afraid of the defendant, Jodi Arias, based on her stalking behavior?
He said...
No, please don't tell me what he said. Just answer my question.
He was afraid of her, yes.
Because of her stalking behavior, correct?
Correct.
And ma'am, if we take a look at this Exhibit 614, if we're talking about aggression and abuse, if Mr. Alexander is afraid of the defendant, extremely afraid of the defendant because of her stalking behavior, then we've moved over to this column here that talks about stalking, correct?
You're mischaracterizing my continuum, Mr. Martinez.
I'm not asking you to tell me about the continuum. Isn't it true that stalking is mentioned under terrorism in your continuum of aggression and abuse? Yes or no?
Stalking, that is...
Yes or no?
It's not yes or no, Mr. Martinez.
Do you see these letters here?
It's not a yes or no answer, Mr. Martinez.
I'm asking you. Do you see this word here that I'm pointing to? Yes or no?
I see that word.
Is that word stalking? Yes or no?
That word
yes
has a definition, and
you're
not using it. You're not using the definition that I apply in this continuum. So if you want me to talk about what stalking means,
Judge,
I will talk about it.
Not responsive.
Sustained. Next question.
Ma'am, that issue involving stalking does appear on the right-hand side of this diagram, correct?
It appears on all three, as I think. Usually it's at the bottom of the other two as well.
Well, let's take a look at the other two. You put this together, right?
Well, it was left off.
No, ma'am. Did you put this together?
This one?
Yes.
This is one that was copied from somebody. This is not my complete continuum, Mr. Martinez.
Well, ma'am, let's go back to the one that you adopted then, all right? Take a look at Exhibit 558. And you say that stalking appears elsewhere. Let's take a look under battering, even though we can't read that real well. Do you see stalking anywhere underneath that column? Yes or no?
No, I don't. I discuss it.
Ma'am, then with regard to the column, you see that? It says abuse. Do you see any stalking underneath there?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes or no?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes or no?
I discussed stalking in both of those areas.
Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Yes or no? Do you see stalking under abuse?
I don't believe that's a yes or no answer, Mr. Martinez.
I'm not asking you
I
what
know,
you
but
believe.
do you want the truth of this, or
Yes,
do you want?
I want you to answer the truthfully and take a
I
look.
can't answer it truthfully with yes or no. That's what I'm saying to you. I would like to be able to answer it truthfully.
Ma'am, what is this word up here?
Abuse,
What is this phrase underneath there?
sporadic physical aggression,
And the phrase underneath that is what?
name calling but not character assassination,
And underneath that is what?
verbal abuse but not psychological abuse,
And underneath that is what?
may be remorseful. Is it
And underneath that, what does that read?
threats of abandonment?
And underneath that,
Aggression takes place without witnesses.
anywhere there, do you see the word stalking, yes or no?
I do not see the word stalking.
We go over to the left under high conflict. Do you see the word stalking anywhere there?
High conflict is not domestic violence, Mr.
I'm
Martinez.
not asking you what high conflict is, am I, ma'am?
That is not an area where you would see stalking, Mr.
Ma'am.
Martinez.
Let's just take a look at this then. You see this word here? What is
High
that word?
conflict
Underneath that, read that for me.
does not solve problems well.
Underneath that,
Anger is an issue in family. Stalking was never listed
ma'am,
there.
I'm not asking you that. What is this right here?
May have remorse.
And underneath that?
May have sporadic physical aggression and utter destruction of property.
And
Can have
underneath-
emotional abuse. No fear. Balance of power and relationship.
Do you see the word stalking there?
It was never there.
The answer is no then, correct?
Correct.
Then if we go over to battering, you see that?
Yes, I do.
What's the first concept there?
Monopolization of perception.
Underneath that?
Generally, more regular physical abuse may not occur without, but may occur without physical.
Underneath that?
Threats to victim support system. Jealousy. Putting down family and friends. Destruction of property. Self-absorbed. Sexual abuse. Change in victim's personality. More generally violent.
Do you see the word stalking anywhere in that column? Yes or no?
No.
The only place that the word stalking appears is under the column terrorism, correct?
Correct, and I define it.
And ma'am, one of the things that you told us about the term stalking yesterday was that terrorism, or not terrorism, but stalking involves a frightened response on behalf of the person who's being stalked. Do you remember telling us that?
A frightened behavior.
Pardon?
Frightened behaviors.
Did you use the word frightened in regard to defining the term stalking?
I used frightened, but it needs to be demonstrated in the behavior of the person. People who are stalked generally take action about being stalked, Mr. Martinez, and I saw no action taken.
What you are saying is that you are, even though you indicated at the start of this exchange that in that Reagan-Housley instant message, you indicated that, yes, you saw that Mr. Alexander, and the term that was used was extremely afraid because of the stalking behavior by the defendant. You're now backing away from that then. You're saying that when you agreed to that, you didn't mean to agree to it. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying
Yes or no? Yes or no?
It is not a yes or no question.
Well, extremely afraid. Mr. Alexander was extremely afraid. Did you not agree with that assessment just minutes ago?
I agreed with his verbiage.
No. Judge, may we approach?
You may.
Ma'am, take a look at Exhibit 615. Read the first page. And once you're done reading the first page, let me know.
Sure.
Have you read it?
Yes, I have.
Isn't it true that the verbiage indicates that Mr. Alexander was extremely afraid of the defendant, Jodi Arias, because of her stalking behavior?
Yes, the verbiage supports that.
And you don't know whether or not he was telling the truth, do you?
No, I don't.
So it could just as well be that he was telling the truth or not, correct?
I would have.
Correct?
I look at the big picture.
No, I'm not asking about the big picture. I'm just asking about this.
If I look specifically at
Judge, may
that
we-
email,
may we
then
approach?
yes.
And so, ma'am, if Mr. Alexander was extremely afraid because of the stalking behavior of the defendant, I want to talk to you about what may have happened in the relationship previously. For example, you are aware that they had a relationship from when to when. What is your understanding?
Their official relationship or their actual
official relationship, yes.
The official relationship started in February of 2007 and officially ended in June or July of 2007.
And ma'am, at the time that this relationship ended in June or July of 2007, isn't it true that at the time that it ended, the defendant was living in California and Mr. Alexander was living in Arizona, correct?
Correct.
And after the relationship ended, isn't it true that the defendant moved from California to Mesa, Arizona, to a neighborhood near Mr. Alexander, correct?
I don't know the neighborhood, but yes, she moved to Mesa.
We have had testimony from the defendant that she moved to a neighborhood that was near the defendant. Would you have any knowledge of anything in your documentation that would indicate anything to the contrary?
No.
And if we take this idea that Mr. Alexander has this fear of the defendant because of her stalking behavior, if they broke up, wouldn't that be an indicator of a stalking, or at least the beginning of a stalking behavior, when the parties break up and then the defendant moves to Mesa, Arizona? Wouldn't that be at least an indication or a starting point for this stalking behavior?
No.
No? Okay. So you see that as appropriate that after the breakup and after the fact that they're in two separate states, that she moves to Arizona, you see no problem with it from a stalking perspective, correct?
I see no end to the relationship in any communication between Mr. Alexander and Ms. Arias that discourages her from moving, nor that acts like the relationship is over. And in fact,
I'm over here.
it's over verbally, I suppose, but behaviorally, it never has ended.
And behaviorally, it hasn't ended because the person in the blue shirt over there moved over to Mesa, Arizona, correct?
No, not correct.
Well, immediately after that, if the relationship ended in June or July of 2007, didn't Mr. Alexander manifest an indication that he was done with the relationship in August of 2007?
No. In fact,
yes or no?
No, it's not a yes or no.
Isn't it true that in August of 2007, the defendant went over to Mr. Alexander's house while he had a guest there? Do you remember that?
In August?
Of 2007, yes.
Yes.
And isn't it true that she was uninvited to come over when Mr. Alexander was there with that guest, correct?
Objection, speculation, knowledge, and mischaracterizes the testimony.
Give me answer, yes or no?
That it's a yes or no?
Yes.
She came over. They had a back and forth relationship.
I'm not
She
asking-
had the password to
Objection
his.
non-responsive.
Next question.
And ma'am, isn't it true that when she came over, she was outside of a glass type of, or in other words, she was on the outside looking in through glass as Mr. Alexander was in an intimate moment with another woman, correct?
She had tried to go through
Yes.
the garage
Yes
where she
or
had
no?
the password, and she couldn't get into the door, so went around and
Objection
left.
non-responsive.
Sustained.
I'm asking you about how she saw what was going on inside. That's what I'm asking you about. Isn't it true that she stood outside looking in through glass as Mr. Alexander was inside with another woman involved in an intimate moment? Yes or no?
Yes, and she immediately left.
Ma'am, did I ask you whether or not she immediately left? Yes or no?
You're asking me very
No,
incomplete
I asked you
questions,
whether
Mr.
or not-
Martinez. You're asking me very incomplete questions that don't get at what my testimony is about, which is about.
Judge, objection non-responsive.
I'm going to ask that you answer only the question you're being asked.